And for the sake of time, I'm going to go ahead and get started, and I will pay close attention to the waiting room. All right, so my name is British Griffiths. I am the Equitable Supply Chain Development Manager here at Chicago Food Policy Action Council. And this session is Alternative Lending with Foodshed Capital, led by Alexander Pate and Emily Tiber. So I'm just going to give a brief bio about each of us speakers that we have today. Emily Tiber is the lending coordinator. And Emily supports FoodCap applicants and borrowers throughout the lending and repayment process and assists in the underwriting of closing of loans. Emily relocated from Colorado to Virginia in 2021 to serve as the managing director of the Josephine Porter Institute of Applied Biodynamics. Prior to that position, she spent 5 years directing the Urban Greenhouse Program at Groundwork Denver, an organization with a mission focused on environmental and social justice. And for Alexander Pate, a little bit about him. As Director of Agricultural Business Advising, Alex focuses on increasing business viability for historically underserved regenerative farmers. He works collaboratively with FoodCap's lending and communications team, along with the executive director, to provide accessible and relevant one-on-one group and self-guided resources to existing and emerging regenerative food business owners. And I will hand it over to our speakers.
Great. Thank you so much, British. And thank you for everyone who's attending this info session. As you can imagine, Emily and I are both very passionate about our work at Foodshed Capital, and we believe truly that the services that we provide through our lending products, through our business support, are really highly valuable resources that are essential for small, medium-sized farms around the country. And so I hope that you all can, take away some useful information here. Hopefully can identify some things that we are doing here at Foodshed Capital that maybe, would be beneficial with your food and farm businesses. And we encourage you all to please reach out as we are talking, pose any questions. There's no problem with interrupting. We'd like this to be as much of a conversation as we can. So as British stated, my name is Alex Pate. I'm the Director of Agricultural Business Advising here at Foodshed Capital. Throughout the presentation and just generally, I wanted to kind of note that Foodshed Capital also goes by FoodCap for short. And so as we're referring to ourselves, we might be interchanging those terms just so that there's no confusion. So who we are, Foodshed Capital is a nonprofit 501c3 organization. We are also have a designation as a CDFI, a community development financial institution. And what we do, what our mission and our focus is to broadly build a more equitable and more regenerative local food system. I'll note for those of you who aren't familiar with what CDFI kind of certification, what that comes with and what that means is, as an organization based on our mission, our established mission, we are responsible for providing services, providing capital to underserved populations. We also, with that designation comes various parameters that we have to be beholden to serving those communities. There's a number of different designations that you can kind of take a look at on your own. The USDA designates socially disadvantaged farmers in various ways. So those are kind of definitions that define the parameters of a lot of the work that we do. We achieve our mission primarily through these three areas that we highlight here. Our bread and butter of our organization is really affordable farm loans. What that looks like is low and no interest loans for small and medium-sized farm businesses. And we also provide another type of loan, but bridge lending. And that's really the bulk of our lending that we do with nonprofits. And Emily, obviously, hop in if I misspeak at any time. But our bridge lending has been really beneficial for a lot of folks who, are recipients of grants A lot of times agricultural grants, are reimbursable. And so what that means is a lot of folks are needing to front that money and then will be compensated on the back end. And a lot of farming operations don't have that capital to put up front anyway. And so that's where we also come in and provide some of that capital so that people can actually receive the awarded grant funds. Another area of our work is around zero cost business support. And that looks like a lot of different things. And, admittedly, we're also refining what our business support looks like. We've been doing a lot of really valuable data gathering with the experiences that we've had working with farm clients of ours. And our technical business support is really looking to kind of support and bolster folks who we work with to be able to achieve lending readiness. Lending readiness is a term that we use frequently within our organization. And we're going to get into that a little bit later in the presentation. But we like to really make sure that our business support works to allow folks to access capital from Foodshed Capital, as well as other organizations, other institutions where folks might go to borrow money. Some of our other business support does include bookkeeping. I will note the marketing piece is a little outdated. We do have a vast network of service providers, of folks with just a lot of really valuable expertise as it pertains to agriculture specifically, as well as business management. And so if we're not able to provide assistance in-house as an organization for any number of things that folks might, kind of initiate contact with us, we are always able to refer them to professionals who are able to fulfill some of the needs of our clients. And then the third piece here is that all of our work really is focused on and prioritizes these historically disadvantaged groups. Again, that's not a term that Foodshed Capital has made up. It's a categorization that the USDA identifies various demographics, but that includes women, BIPOC individuals, immigrants, LGBTQ individuals, and also veterans are included in that. And we do work with a number of veterans as well. And then the last piece, again, this is broadly the case. I will say as well, we've recently had some updates in what we call our lending matrix, and it's basically to determine what the interest rate is that people will lend with us. And so we do reserve 0% interest for BIPOC farmers, but we also noticed, again, through the work that we've done, that not everybody is in the same place financially. Not everybody's in the same place as far as cash flow in their business, or really kind of where the starting line is when they've established their businesses. And so we've created a more nuanced system for determining what an interest rate is for our clients. I will say that our upper interest rate is 4%, which is still substantially lower than most other lenders, and definitely lower than the national interest rate. And then that rate is bumped down to 3.5 if people automatically enroll in auto pay for repayments of those loans. But our loan rates will vary between 0 and 4%. And another piece, this isn't on the presentation, but I do also want to note, because the word regenerative has come up a number of times, both in our introduction, you'll see it throughout our presentation here. When we talk about regenerative, and with all of you having being within agriculture, there's a lot of semantics around the terminologies, I should say, regenerative versus sustainable versus climate smart versus regenerative organic, right? And so Foodshed Capital is not in the business of creating barriers to access capital. And so when we speak of regenerative farming practices, and the way we think about it, is through essentially a suite of regenerative farming strategies, practices that folks can adopt to be more ecologically centered in the farming that they're doing. And so when we evaluate whether or not an organization, a farm, is aligned with our values as regenerative, we look at the full picture, trying to understand, what's within their means to be able to enact as far as regenerative farming practices. There are a lot of things that are really expensive to implement and that maybe are inaccessible to a lot of people, and we'll never exclude folks or put up barriers to our accessing our capital through that kind of practice. We work with a number of folks as well who perhaps have historically been utilizing conventional farming practices and are looking to transition into regenerative or organic farming practices, and we work with those types of people. I was actually just reviewing some notes today about a trip that some of our colleagues recently took to Puerto Rico, where we were partnering with a network of farms there. And I noted while reading these notes that they specified, the difficulties that a lot of farmers in Puerto Rico face in being able to implement regenerative farming in the same way that farmers on the mainland are able to. And a big reason is because of the fact that it's an island nation and that they don't have access to some of the resources that are easily accessible here. There's a lot of things regarding climate issues that also kind of dictate that. So we always try to see the whole picture. With that, I'll go back to the presentation. So these are some of our values. I don't want to read off all of these, but I think it's definitely useful to kind of speak to each of these pillars of our organization in an applicable way. So when we talk about equity, I think we covered a lot of that already, right? Largely, and this, kind of goes back to the founding of our organization. Our focus on equity is pivotal in everything we do. We see that historically there have been, and today it persists to this day, a lot of barriers to accessing capital through some of the more conventional lenders. I think USDA comes to mind because we work with them, and as the federal government, right, they are in a way kind of omnipresent in a lot of what farmers do in the US, and that's unavoidable interacting with them. At the same time, right, there's a lot of really valuable resources that people maybe aren't aware of, or perhaps there's a negative stigma associated with the USDA that we like to still inform people about, assist in applying for some of these resources, because it really is a lifeline for a lot of folks. And so as an alternative lender, we do not ask for, we don't run credit score, we don't run credit reports on people who lend with us. We don't collateralize any of our loans. So we'll never put, we'll never threaten to take farm equipment, vehicles, homes, or anything like that, because we want to be able to provide access to folks who have difficulties historically accessing it. In regards to patience and risk tolerance, I think these two have a nice interplay, because similar to what I just mentioned with Puerto Rico, right, they're obviously bombarded with hurricanes on an annual basis. A lot of times there's significant damage to farm infrastructure, loss of life, both to people as well as animals alike. And oftentimes, that instability, that extra layer of instability, because agriculture already has so many variables that can impact a farm's operation, that as a lender, we look to be as flexible as possible, understanding the risks that are inherently involved in agriculture, to really provide support rather than being, in contact, reaching out, asking where our money is. We frequently work with folks who for some reason or another, they're unable to pay a monthly payment for a loan, and we put some sort of forbearance or pause on those loan payments. And so really the biggest piece here is communication. We have great relationships with our borrowers, and as a small lender are very flexible in kind of dictating how repayments are made. And so we look to be as flexible as possible given the riskiness of farming. Again, to the piece around the size of our team, I think this speaks to the agility, straightforwardness, the transparency of our services. Outside of having that flexibility, like I just mentioned, with, our loan repayment schedules. There are a number of instances where, and I think with bridge loans, this seems the most pertinent, where we've been able to really provide that capital to folks in a very quick manner. And, we still have eligibility criteria. We're going to review that in a little bit. And so we can't necessarily make concessions for some of just the general documents that we need. But, in the case of like bridge lending, one of the primary documents we use is the award letter, really just proving that you've been awarded this and that, those funds will be coming your way. And so we are able to move a bit faster than some of the larger lending institutions because of our size and because of our mission. The stewardship piece around food production should protect ecosystems, biodiversity. This again, back to the piece of regenerative. I won't hound that too much. I think I probably talked a little bit too much about that anyway. But that is the stewardship. Land stewardship is at the center of what we do, and that's who we look to really support. Unfortunately, I think our food system has been built and sustained in a way that it doesn't financially incentivize ecologically focused farming. What it has incentivized is large scale mass production, kind of a race to the bottom as far as pricing. I know a lot of you are familiar with that, considering that this is a buyer supplier mixer. And so again, that's a pivotal to our work and informs a lot of what we do. And then the piece of partnership, I think we look at our borrowers as partners. We find often just as much value from working with them as they do from either accessing our business support or the capital that we provide. And we also lean heavily on partnerships between organizations that are really great at doing things outside of our scope of work. I've been looking at the agenda for this event and seen a lot of familiar faces with folks who Foodshed Capital has worked with before. I'd actually like to speak to just a briefly note an incredible partnership that we've had earlier this year, and it's been ongoing. But FoodCap has worked with the Conservation Fund's Working Farmer Fund. And the Working Farmer Fund has worked with and supported and actually worked on like some really incredible land acquisition projects with Urban Growers Collective. There are some other farms that I probably won't drop their names, but I do like to speak of Urban Growers Collective because they have such a vast network of farms within their kind of cohort in Chicago. They are an incredible organization, and we frequently rely on partnerships to be able to amplify some of the work that folks are doing to really be a nice complementary piece to the incredible work that folks are already doing. How we work. So again, we're not trying to replicate some of these institutions that have historically been kind of difficult to navigate for various farming operations. And so we look to streamline our processes. As I mentioned as well, and this is part of really not replicating traditional lending, is that we try to provide a lot of support on the business, on the technical assistance side, to be able to help folks prepare the financial documents that are needed to lend with us as well as other institutions. And I think we can move past this because we kind of covered that through some of the other topics I spoke about. So folks who we have worked with primarily are in agricultural production. That looks like livestock as well as veggie production. This has looked like larger, and by larger, I just mean relative to small farms, larger, more rural farms. We also work with a number of agricultural farms. We work with food businesses more broadly. I think we are a bit more specific when we try to like understand alignment of values with some of those food businesses, as well as again, making sure that what they're doing is aligned with our values and able to proliferate a more sustainable food shed. One example is a small bakery that I know we've worked with in the past, that they did a lot of sourcing of their grains from various local producers, and they had like a grain mill and did that on site. And it was really, perhaps not the food production side of agricultural businesses, but it was a pivotal business that processed agricultural goods in order to create a finished value-added product. And so we work with food businesses of all different types. We recently were talking with a dairy farm that did, or actually an ice cream company that sourced from local dairy farms. And so we kind of have a wide scope in who we will work with, who we can provide capital to in that regard. I think when it comes to our business support and financial management, social entrepreneurship, I think those things are very closely intertwined. And, it's not perhaps the most exciting topic. When we talk about financial management, we could talk about bookkeeping and accounting. But what we've learned through our work over the past few years has been that there's a huge knowledge gap around bookkeeping and accounting practices and the pivotal nature that plays in operating a successful farm business. And so as we kind of shift our business support to more tightly align with our lending practices, what we're looking to focus in on is really helping folks develop systems, bookkeeping systems, so that they can accurately understand the cash flow of their business, that they can ultimately produce the financials that will provide those insights. And then also, because whether or not folks lend with FoodCap or any other lender, a lot of what's required to access that capital through loans, even a lot of what's required to access some grants and apply for those kind of opportunities, people ask for, and they need income statements, right? They need cash flow statements. They might need projections. And if folks haven't been keeping those historically, it's really difficult to retroactively go back and try to create these documents. And so part of and an increasingly essential part of our business support is to help establish those systems, help teach people about the importance of bookkeeping and accounting so that they can truly have a sustainable business that is healthy far into the future. Because accounting is difficult. I'm not an accountant. Emily is not an accountant. We've had to take a lot of time and do training ourselves. We have people on our team, and Emily, much more so than me, is very much an expert within our lending, our underwriting process. But we understand that farming requires people to be experts in all of these areas, right? Not only are you plant scientists and farmers working the fields, you're also oftentimes mechanics, electricians, plumbers, all of these different things. And a lot of people go to school for a long time to become accountants. We understand that that's not a skill set that everybody has. But the nature of running businesses is being able to have systems in place that can give those insights. And so that's a lot of what we do as well, and increasingly looking to support folks in that regard. I'll note as well with just this last bullet point of events, marketing, communications, while we don't do a lot of that in-house anymore, again, we have such an extensive network of business professionals who we frequently connect farm clients with and are able to still provide resources around each of these topics. So our lifetime impact, this presentation, I think at this point is probably like 4 or 5 months old, but I know that we've surpassed 3 million in total capital deployed. I know that we've surpassed 120 loans given since this presentation was updated. I'll also note here, we have made loans from Georgia to Vermont. I would say now we're from Texas to Vermont. We recently made a loan in Texas. We've recently made loans in Chicago and Chicagoland area. And so we are a national organization. earlier on in our organization's history, we did lend primarily in the Mid-Atlantic and in the Northeast. But we are expanding. And like I mentioned, the importance of partnerships. When we expand to new geographies, we do so with strategic partners because we value the relationship that we have and can establish with the borrowers that we have or with the clients that we provide business support. And we want to make sure that even if we are not physically located in a particular area, that people are still surrounded by a network of organizations that are value aligned with Foodshed Capital, and that you're kind of held in this larger net of providers that can really address all the needs that farmers have. Back to like part of our CDFI requirements, that 75% of funding being deployed to BIPOC-led organizations. That's a big focus for us. And as a CDFI, that's the rough ratio of like how we look to deploy capital. And we, again, prioritize these historically disadvantaged groups, which include BIPOC folks, as well as women-owned farms, queer-owned farms, and immigrant-owned farms. We've provided over, at this point, 990 hours of business support. I know we've surpassed 1,000 at this point, impacted over 12,000 acres, and supported nearly 500 farm and food jobs. So to just specifically kind of wrap up our discussion about our business support, the financial literacy piece is big. And I would encourage you all to visit our website either now, following this presentation. And if anything that I said, anything that Emily will say resonates with you, yeah, check out our website, sign up for our newsletter. We host a number of different events earlier last year, and actually recognize a couple names on this call of folks who attended, but we host a number of different workshops and trainings. Earlier this year, we did a 2-part series on, again, the sexiest topic ever, tax readiness. It's great. It gets me excited. But right, again, there's a huge knowledge gap there, even in finding the individual who's in our network who we had present this tax readiness webinar. We identified him because finding that level of expertise within agricultural taxes in particular is very difficult. And I think for anybody here who's tried to identify accountants that have a specialty in agriculture, how difficult it is to find those people. They have wait lists of individuals that would like to become clients of theirs. And so we look to provide various webinars and resources around some of these topics. Accounting software. We've done a number of trainings. We're currently hosting a small cohort of farmers in Virginia and doing an accounting and bookkeeping workshop with them over the course of, I think our last one was in September. We're having one upcoming this month, and then our 3rd session in January. And we are working with them to do exactly like what I mentioned earlier. We're first covering the fundamentals of accounting, understanding terminology, and just the way in which some of these accounting principles factor into the business management side of running a farm. That's then followed by folks actually getting a QuickBooks Online account. We were lucky enough to get some funding from Virginia State University, and they'll be covering the cost of that for those folks. And then we'll be working with the instructor of that course, who's a certified tax professional, to actually start to audit their bookkeeping system and get them off to a good start for the 2025 growing season. Yeah, we've done a lot of work there. We had a grant program earlier this year that we distributed funds for people to have the cost of their annual QuickBooks subscription covered for a year. And then we do one-on-one training with some trained accountants into how you're hooking up all of your bank accounts to QuickBooks, how you're going to manage that in real time, all of which have been really helpful in setting up some of these farms for success. I think at this point, I can, well, let me finish up this slide actually, and then my colleague Emily will take over. But in addition to some of the specific business supports that we provide, we also do provide a number of services just around more broad business planning. This kind of 1, 3, and 5-year goal benchmarks has been helpful from like a bit more scaled back perspective when it comes to planning a farm business, when it comes to determining where you're going to you want to invest some of your invest in your company because you think that one enterprise might be more lucrative than another, you think that you're maybe losing money somewhere. So we like to do those longer term planning sessions with folks so that it can really dictate the overall trajectory of where they want to move their business. Some of these pieces around developing financial reports and all the documents that are needed to apply for loans, Emily's going to get into on the next slide. And so I'll go ahead and hand it over to you, Emily.
Thanks, Alex. So as British mentioned at the top, I work with the lending team at Foodshed Capital. So I work very closely one-on-one with our applicants to help steward them through the application and underwriting process. And then I stay connected with them throughout the loan servicing period. And some of those words right there are even scary and intimidating. Loan underwriting, application process, all these things. Foodshed Capital's goal is to make this process as transparent and as accessible as possible. And Alex gave a great overview of some of the ways that we try and do that and the various support structures we try and put around our lending to make sure that people are able to access the capital they need to have successful farm businesses. So as Alex mentioned, we provide patient and flexible capital to regenerative farmers with that very strong focus on equity that he mentioned at the beginning. So we will write loans for your particular situation, whatever needs you have. We do the bridge lending, which Alex mentioned, is super useful. If you are looking to get an NRCS high tunnel grant, if you are going to apply for any other sort of USDA grant program that is reimbursable, a bridge loan can be super helpful. And we offer lending for operational expenses, infrastructure and equipment expenses. The only thing I always want to mention that we do not offer lending for is land access. We get so many inquiries about land lending, and we just want so badly to support farmers in that area because it is such a huge need. But unfortunately, Foodshed Capital is not a mortgage lender. So we cannot issue you a loan to purchase land. But pretty much anything else, we are open to talking about it. Our loan applications tend to work on a quarterly schedule. So if you were to go to our website and fill out our intake form right now, we would probably send you an email and say, great, we're going to look at this loan in Q1 of next year. So it's important to understand that we are not an emergency lender. If your well pump goes out and you need $10,000 to fix your well, we really understand that that's a huge need and we would love to support you, but unfortunately we're not going to be able to get through our underwriting process in the 4 or 5 days that you would need that money. So yeah, that's just something to keep in mind. Application underwriting is a process that takes some time. We're not an emergency lender. Our terms, we have general loan terms. So the terms are your interest rate and then the time period and the frequency of payments you make when you repay the loan. We do loans as small as $15,000. Generally a $15,000 loan will have a 24 to 36 month repayment term. And as Alex mentioned earlier, our interest rate cap usually is around 4%. And our interest rate can be as low as 0 for BIPOC farmers. Most of our loans have a 3-month grace period. So you issue your loan, you get your funds deposited, you don't have a payment due for at least 3 months. And then, yeah, no credit checks. The credit reporting system is inherently discriminatory. We do not utilize it. So we will not pull your credit when you apply for a loan. There is another element of that. We do not report your loan payments to the credit agencies. So if you take out a loan through Foodshed Capital and you pay it back on time, everything's in good standing, that is not going to boost your credit score. We won't tell the credit agencies anything about it. So keep that in mind. Foodshed Capital loan products are not credit building products. We don't charge any sort of fees. There's no penalties. We're not going to charge you a processing fee. We're not going to charge you a servicing fee. None of that. And yeah, I think we're over 150 loans now. We've collateralized one time. It's really rare. We generally 99.999% of the time do not collateralize loans. So what makes you eligible for a loan from Foodshed Capital? And I do want to just mention, Liz, I do see you in the chat. I will answer that. What makes you eligible for a loan? First of all, you have to have a focus on food. So sometimes we'll get folks who are, doing medicinal herbs or trying to process essential oils or something like that. That is all awesome, worthwhile things, but that is not our purview. We are Foodshed Capital. Our mission is to support the food shed and create sustainable food systems. So your business needs to have a primary focus on food. Every once in a while, we have once in a blue moon worked with somebody who has, some sort of floriculture business, or maybe they're a pollinator habitat operation, something like that, that is, connected in there in some way. But for the most part, if you want a loan with Foodshed Capital, your focus has to be on food. And that kind of also ties into, sometimes we'll get applicants who have, Airbnbs with a little garden involved, or, some other sort of customer service-based business that has a food element. And while we love to see that entrepreneurship and really want to support those folks, that is not a primary focus on food. We want to see a clear dedication to regenerative agriculture. As Alex mentioned, this is an iffy term. These terms change all the time. People come up with new ones. We don't do any lending to conventional row crop farmers. So if you're growing, corn and bean out there in the Midwest, God love you, but you're not an eligible borrower with Foodshed Capital. Basically, we want to be able to see, as far as regeneration goes, that you are caring for your soil, that you are caring for the ecosystem as a whole, and be able to kind of have a conversation about what regenerative agriculture means to you. So as long as you feel comfortable doing that, that's a pretty good indication that you are farming in some sort of regenerative way, and we'd love to support you. Meaningfully be contributing to your regional food shed. So this was another one that gets, into some kind of gray areas. We are dedicated to supporting businesses that are going to be successful over the long term, and that are going to grow and make meaningful contributions. So be able to sell in quantities enough that, puts a dent in the foods in your local food shed. That basically means, not a kitchen garden sort of situation. It is worthwhile to acknowledge that there is an element of creating resilience within the food system that includes things like community gardens, educational spaces, all of those things are meaningful contributions. So it's not strictly a matter of how much food are you producing, but what is your contribution to the food shed on a larger scale? Proof of existing business or nonprofit registration. So we do not lend to individuals, we lend to businesses. All right, farms and food businesses. Bruce, I see you in there. We'll get to that in a second. So if you are a farmer and you're operating as a sole proprietor and you have filed a Schedule F on your taxes, that makes you an eligible food business. If you are operating as an LLC and you have a state issued number, identification number, that makes you an eligible food business. If you are a nonprofit and you have a 501c3 designation, that also makes you a food business. But if you say have been growing a beautiful garden and have never filed a Schedule F, you're not a food business. You are just a fabulous gardener and we support you in that, but you're not eligible for lending. Tax compliance. This is always a big one. We get lots of applicants who are confused about their taxes in some way. Maybe they've been selling and didn't realize they had to remit income tax to the state. Maybe they've had employees but didn't realize they had to remit payroll taxes to the state. Often we get individuals who say, you know, I didn't file my taxes last year. It just got away from me, or I didn't think I made enough money. You do need to be tax compliant. You need to be up to date with your taxes to get a loan with Foodshed Capital. As Alex mentioned, there is such a dearth of service providers out there that understand ag taxes, that understand ag business support. So if you are not compliant on your taxes, please don't be embarrassed. You are not alone, and there is a path to addressing that. And we are happy to refer you to folks, or if we can help you in-house, we will. But in order to be eligible for a loan, you do need to have filed your taxes in the 2 most recent years. If you are a business that has been earning revenue and is required to remit sales tax, you need to have done that. And if you are a business that is employing people, you need to have paid your payroll taxes. If any of those things feel just totally foreign, you're like, oh, I didn't know I was supposed to do that, feel free to shoot myself or Alex an email. We are happy to talk to you about it. And people ask us why do we have to have filed our taxes to take on a loan? As we've discussed, Foodshed Capital does not do any of the things that traditional lenders do for purposes of risk mitigation. So traditional lenders will look at your credit score and say, oh, we feel like this would be a risky loan to make. Or they will look at your, they will take collateral in order to lower their risk, because, well, if this person doesn't pay their loan back, you know, we're just going to go in and take their tractor. We don't do any of those things. So this is a risk mitigation tool that we can do. Requiring people to be up to date on their taxes, showing us their tax returns, demonstrates to us that the IRS, at least, is not going to shut down your business for non-payment. Financial needs. So this is a CDFI requirement. As a community financial or community development financial institution, we are required to have at least 60% of our lending go to low income borrowers. So the metric we use is the HUD state median income. You have to be 80% or lower of state median income. We will take your adjusted gross income from your most recent year's tax return to determine that. That's another reason it's really important to have filed your federal taxes. So at least 60% of our loans have to be to those individuals. Now that's both the number of loans we make and also the dollar amount of lending we do. So if you feel like you are above that threshold, that doesn't automatically make you ineligible. Just keep in mind that you might be lower on the list when it comes to our lending capital. And finally, alignment with our mission and values. We do want to support people who have been historically underserved when it comes to capital access. That includes people of color, that includes women, and that includes LGBTQ plus individuals. All right, use of funds. Equipment and infrastructure, if you need to build a fence, if you need to put in a wash pack, if you need to buy a paper pot transplanter, we're happy to fund those things. Working capital, maybe you're just looking at your books and you're like, it's going to cost me $30,000 to get into June when I will start to really see income from my DBO operation. That's something we would fund. Transition or enhancement, if you need to let your fields rest for 3 years in order to build soil so that you can transition to a more regenerative farm, if that's going to cost you some money, come talk to us about it. We're happy to issue loans for purposes of transition and enhancement. Also, if you are working towards USDA organic certification, that is something that costs a lot of money. And there are not adequate grant programs out there to support that. So we are happy to talk about lending to support that. Loans for paying staff, grant funded infrastructure and equipment. If you, as we discussed, have a reimbursable grant that you've been awarded and you need that capital up front so that you can purchase the equipment, purchase the infrastructure, and then submit for reimbursement. We do that sort of landing. And then, as we talked about, we are not a mortgage lender, so we do not issue loans in furtherance of land security. What we do, will do is talk to you a little bit, see what your situation is, and see if we have anybody in our network of lenders we can refer you out to. We've had success doing this with borrowers in the past, and that's always a great thing. I will also say, if you are looking to get financing through FSA, we're happy to talk to you about the forms involved and do whatever we can to support you in accessing that opportunity for mortgage financing. All right, so if you are a brand new business and you don't have any financial history, you would be eligible for a seed loan. So $15,000, rates 0 to 4% of interest, 3 to 4 year loan term. $15,000, that might get you started with some operational costs. That might get you some basic equipment you need. That might be lending you take out in order to pay a professional to formulate a business plan, develop a marketing plan. Any of those things, we're happy to talk to you about what some of those upfront startup business costs can be and how we can support you there. Loans from up to $50,000 for existing businesses. Excuse me. Those same interest rates from 0 to 4%. We will generally structure that with a 3 to 5 year loan term. If that loan is closer to $25,000, it'll be closer to that 3 years. 50 will be closer to that 5 years. And those are for businesses who are already earning revenue. Please be aware Foodshed Capital evaluates your max loan amount based on the revenue you're earning. So maybe you've been in business for a couple years and last year your business finally brought in $10,000 in revenue. That is awesome. That is a really, really great start to a business. But that is not enough revenue for us to issue you a $100,000 loan. Generally, Foodshed Capital will issue loans a max of the greatest amount of revenue your business earned in the most recent 3 years. So keep that in mind. And then those bridge loans. We've done bridge loans in excess of $50,000. We do a lot of the NRCS high tunnel bridge loans. Those generally come in between 20 and 25. Once again, those rates are between 0 and 4%. If you're working with NRCS or another USDA agency, often what we will do is we will tie the repayment schedule to the reimbursement and collect that repayment directly from the USDA agency. So that's really great. It saves steps on everybody's part. That's been a really awesome program for us, and it allows access to that program to a lot of folks who would not have access otherwise because of those upfront capital requirements. All right, so we did a seed loan for Healing Hope Urban Gardens. That is Natasha. She is fantastic. She's a veteran and she started her operation at the Peterson Oasis Incubation Farm in 2022, farming on a ½ acre. She has a diversified vegetable operation that she started up and supplied food to the local Petersburg Elementary right there on site, as well as at the farmers market. Also has a small value add business of hot sauce and herbed salts. And we gave her a 0% interest loan so that she could purchase some equipment, supplies, and pay her operational costs for her first season in production. Dodo Farms. Excuse me, y'all. I have a toddler. He's a little petri dish. Dodo Farms is a fantastic farm in Maryland. They have been in operation for 8 years. They were operating on leased land to great success, and we're really looking to achieve land security. This is one of the examples of we issued them a 0% interest loan in 2023. They came back to us and said, hey, we'd love to go buy this farm not too far from us so that we can farm on land that we own instead of land that we're leasing. And we expressed to them, well, we're not a mortgage lender, but we'd love to connect you and give you a reference to a peer group up here in this space. That was Dirt Capital Partners. They successfully were able to achieve a land security loan product from Dirt Capital, and then we came in with $100,000 loan to help them get the farm set up. So that paid for fencing, a new driveway so they could get their farm vehicles on there, and also the site prep and a concrete pad to put in their wash and pack and their cold storage. So that was wonderful. Feel really good about that loan. And then New Roots Community Farm. This is an example of some bridge lending. So if you're a nonprofit organization, you are likely only eligible for bridge lending. Nonprofits' revenue is dependent on fundraising that is generally not guaranteed. So for the most part, we only do bridge loans to nonprofits. There is an exception if you are have a revenue generating element of your nonprofit. If you have a social enterprise that's generating revenue, we're happy to look at that. But New Roots, we did a $50,000 bridge loan to support their USDA funding, 3.5% interest, and they have continued to grow and are just a really wonderful operation there in Fayetteville, West Virginia.
And I think that wraps it up. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So let me answer a couple of these questions we had. So how competitive is our loan program? It's a good question, Liz. We definitely have more applicants than we issue loans to, but I would not say that's because the loan program is so competitive we don't have enough funding or we can't, handle all the applications. It's generally because applicants either are looking for emergency lending and they don't have the time to go through the loan process, or because they're not lending ready. They don't have the financial documents required in order to underwrite a loan. In which case, maybe we work with them on business support to try and get the loan documents ready. Or, they just realize this isn't an opportunity for them and they go someplace else. And if you have any other questions, if that didn't answer your question, put it in the chat or feel free to come on and I'm happy to chat about it. And then Bruce, do we loan to aquaponic food producing entities? We have yet to loan to any sort of aquaponic operations. CEA agriculture, and I say this as somebody who, spent 5 years of my life under a glass roof, managing large scale hydroponic facilities. Generally a CEA is not super regenerative. There's not a lot of soil health going on in there. So, short answer, we never have. If somebody were to come to us and say, hey, I have this great aquaponics operation, we would probably have a conversation, but we would probably try and refer you out to a peer in the space. Alex, do you have any other thoughts on that?
No, I think the piece of the conversation is correct. Like, we're not ruling anything out. I do think, especially, given potentially some geographic factors, there can be an argument to be made about water use efficiency, perhaps,
Sure.
right? And so there's just different ways in which we could kind of potentially finesse that conversation to actually be, something. I think you have some really innovative operations that like maybe house bees and that their bees pollinate within their indoor strawberry farm, but then are just like pollinators also like at large. But yeah, I think the conversation piece is there. But like Emily, you noted, we haven't done so yet. We're not closed off to it, but it's outside of the scope of what we've done thus far.
If anybody else has any specific questions, please do put them in the chat. In the last 3 minutes, I would just like to emphasize the largest, where's their list of loan requirements available? On our website,
I'll put it in the chat in a moment.
foodcap.org. Yeah. Also, if you are interested in the loan, feel free to shoot me or Alex an email. I'll go ahead and put my email in the chat as well. And we're happy to touch base and talk about your particular situation. The biggest challenge applicants have in getting a loan from Foodshed Capital is that they do not have the documents we need to put together a document package. So if you are a farmer or a food business person, if you're just starting out, you need to have your bookkeeping set. We are looking for income statements, which is also called a profit and loss statement. And we are looking for a balance sheet. And I'll tell you, I spent 10 years working on farms before and never heard any of those terms. So it's a reflection of the dearth of service providers and the dearth of kind of that business education that often comes along with small farming. But those are super important and you want to start now. You want to be doing your bookkeeping now. If you haven't been doing it previously, the best time to start is right now. And that's something that your local SBDC can help you with. That's something we here at Foodshed Capital can help you with. That's something that the regional food business centers that the USDA just started up can help you with. Always happy to have a conversation, but that is the biggest barrier we see for applicants. They come to us, they say, I've got this great food business, I want to expand, I want to grow, I need X number of dollars to do it. And we say, awesome, we'd love to help you. Let me see your business, your income statement, let me see your balance sheet. And they say, I don't have those things. And it's a lot harder to historically put those together than it is to start right now. So if that's something that you have interest in developing, feel free to reach out to FoodCap. We're happy to support you in that. Or as I said, there are other resources, USDA, regional food business centers, your local SBDC, probably somebody here today.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add two things before we conclude. We had somebody with a direct message question asking about what states we lend to. We do not have any restrictions on states that we lend to. That being said, given the fact that we try to foster relationships with our borrowers, try to be available for resources, when we lend to new regions, like when we came to Chicago earlier this year, we did so in partnership with the Conservation Fund, Working Farmers Fund. And so there are places that we've lent to outside of any state that we'd lent to before, or outside of a state that we have organizational partnerships in. Will likely come and visit, right? And that's like the piece is like, we want to consider our capacity to be on site and visit your farm and understand your operation wholly. So we don't have state restrictions in that way. And then the last piece, Emily alluded to what her agricultural experience is. I have agricultural experience myself, went to school for plant and soil sciences. Our director of development ran a poultry, a chicken farm for close to a decade. Our controller grew up on a dairy farm and I think does some farming now. So like we love and care about food systems, our food systems, local food systems, agriculture, the plight of farmers, and we understand that. And so all of our decisions that we make in the products that we provide and the services we provide come from a place of care and concern for agriculture. You know, I'm in Brooklyn, New York now, but I lived and grew up in Chicago. I love and care about Chicago. And, you know, that sort of care and concern goes into all the work that we do. I think a lot of financial institutions, you know, given my personal perspectives as well, rightfully deserve a bit of criticism. And I think that, you know, we're all kind of hesitant in ways that people have been treated by and targeted by predatory lending. And so when we do our work, we have that in the back of our mind that like we look to kind of be an alternative to that system to help folks not succumb to some of those things that have happened that are happening. And so I think that's just an important note because a lot of people ask us, why does Foodshed Capital give 0% loans? What's in it for you all? It's that we are a nonprofit, that we are CDFI, and that we love food, we love farmers, and that's what we want to support. So I'll end on that note.